So to make the most of it, put on your headphones, choose a cozy corner, dim the lights, and close your eyes. Get ready to follow the story of the week with me. You will learn the story of Martina, who was pressured to accept romantic encounters with other men to pay off the family's debts. Discover how and why Martina ended up involved with these powerful people, linked to Rubens. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support us and guarantee more exciting stories like this. So let's go. Rubens Silva, a middle-aged man, had worked as a salesman in an electronics store for years. In recent times, he has accumulated considerable debts, the result of impulsive spending and less than careful financial management. Credit cards, loans, and overdue bills were piling up, taking away his sleep and plunging him into constant anxiety one day. Upon returning home, Ruben found his wife Martina sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen from crying. She held the eviction paper in her shaking hands. "Ruben, what are we going to do?" she asked, her voice weak and broken. Martina already knew that finances were tight, but she was unaware of the true severity of the debts accumulated by Ruben, now faced with the real threat of losing their home. She felt filled with a mixture of fear, anger, and deep frustration. Martina, letting the tears run down her face. Ruben, feeling the weight of his impulsive choices, wrapped her in his arms, trying to offer some comfort. "I'm sorry, Martina. I should have been more honest about our situation. I promise I'll fix this." Martina looked at him, a small hope shining amid the despair in her eyes. "But how, Ruben? How are we going to get out of this? Do you remember the store get-together tomorrow morning? I think we should go party, Ruben. You can't be serious with everything we're going through," she replied, astonished. "I know it seems foolish, but listen, we need to take a break to clear our minds. Who knows? Maybe an idea will appear, or even a chance to help in our situation." Martina hesitated, reflecting on Ruben's words. After a few moments, he realized that maybe he was right. A moment of distraction could help to reorganize ideas. The next morning, Ruben and Martina got ready for the party, making an effort to appear calm. Martina, in particular, decided to take good care of her appearance. She chose a navy blue dress that she hadn't worn in a long time, arranged her hair carefully, and applied soft but elegant makeup. When she left the room, Ruben looked at her for a moment, impressed. "Martina, you look wonderful," he praised, unable to hide his admiration upon arriving at the party. The couple's presence quickly attracted attention. Martin, with her outstanding beauty and bright smile, attracted attention as she walked through the room. Ruben, visibly proud, accompanied her and made a point of introducing her to his colleagues. "You are a lucky man," Ruben exclaimed. "Kyo, one of the oldest salespeople. I never imagined you had such a charming wife." Shortly afterwards, Karina, a colleague, approached Martina. "My dear, you look incredible. Ruben never told us that he was married to someone so elegant and charming." She praised admiringly. The praise didn't stop, and even the manager joined in on the fun. "So this is the secret you keep from us?" Ruben teased the boss, giving him a friendly pat on the back. Martina, although she felt flattered, was a little uncomfortable with all the unexpected attention. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and internally, she wondered why Rubens never talked about her in the workplace. At the end of the party, the couple returned home carrying different thoughts, but sharing a rare moment of closeness. The brief moment of relief soon dissipated, and the harsh reality of his situation came back to bite him in the following weeks. Despite efforts to stabilize finances, the situation seemed to worsen even further. Desperate to increase the rent, Ruben began to accept all the extra hours he was offered, often working late into the night. Martina, in turn, tried to get a job to help with expenses, but without immediate results. soon began to impact the couple's health arguments between them became more common and intense, reflecting the emotional exhaustion caused by the increasing pressure under the intense financial pressure that threatened their relationship. Ruben found one day, when opening the mail, a letter from the bank informing him that the house would go into foreclosure if the late installments were not paid within 30 days. That news was a devastating blow, leaving them on the brink of despair. What do we do now? It seems that no matter how hard we try, the situation only gets worse. Ruben felt the responsibility weigh even more heavily on his shoulders. I knew they needed an urgent and radical solution, or they would lose everything they had built. Faced with despair, he decided to take an action he never imagined would be necessary. The next morning, he arrived at work early, determined to execute his new plan, deciding to talk to his boss, Mr. Lorenzo, before the store opened. Ruben took a deep breath, and with his heart racing and his hands shaking, he knocked on the office door. "Come in," replied a firm voice. "Good morning, Mr. Lorenzo. Sorry to bother you so early, but I need to talk to you," he said, controlling his anxiety. Mr. Lorenzo looked up over his reading glasses, studying UB, curiously. "What happened?" "Ruben, you seem tense." Ruben took a deep breath and began to explain his situation. He explained about the accumulated debts, the imminent risk of losing his home, and the difficulties his family was facing. "Mr. Lorenzo, I know it's a lot to ask, but would it be possible for a salary advance, or perhaps a loan? I promise to work tirelessly to pay back every penny." Mr. Lorenzo listened in silence, his face remaining serious and impenetrable. In the end, he removed his glasses. "Ruben, I'm sorry for everything you're going through. It seems like a difficult situation, but unfortunately, I can't help financially." Ruben felt his heart sink. "The store is also facing difficulties," continued Mr. Lorenzo. "We are barely making ends meet, so loans or advances are out of the question." Feeling as if the ground was crumbling beneath his feet, Ruben realized that his last hope had evaporated. "I understand, Mr. Lorenzo," he replied, struggling not to show his frustration. "Thank you for listening to me," as he turned to leave. Mr. Lorenzo added, "Ruben, you are a great employee. I hope you can overcome this phase if I need to. I can try to arrange some extra hours," said Mr. Lorenzo, offering a consolation that seemed little given the weight of the situation. Ruben nodded silently and left the office. Although grateful for the offer, he knew that a few extra hours wouldn't solve the problem he and Martina were facing. He felt more cornered than ever, not knowing who to turn to with the weight of worries on his shoulders. He returned to work, thinking about how he would break the news to Martina, and whether there was still any alternative they could try to escape that despair while returning home on the bus. His cell phone rang. It was his boss with a proposal that seemed like an unexpected solution to the crisis. During the conversation, Mr. Lorenzo mentioned that at the party, a friend from another company had been enchanted by his wife, and upon learning of the financial difficulties the couple was facing, offered to pay off all their debts. There was, however, one condition: he wanted Ruben to allow his wife to spend a night in his company. The proposal shocked Ruben, and he was overcome by a storm of emotions. The possibility of solving all the problems immediately sounded like a relief, but the price was too high. His dignity, his relationship with Martina, everything seemed threatened. He was silent for a few moments, unable to respond. And you, what would you do in this situation? Comment below, and take the opportunity to leave your like, "What a terrible situation." Mr. Lorenzo, trying to make the situation more acceptable, explained that it would only be one night, and that no one else needed to know. Furthermore, he assured that his friend was a respectable person, and that Martina would be safe. As the bus continued, this was a decision he couldn't make alone. Finally, he replied to Mr. Lorenzo that he would need time to think and discuss the matter with his wife before making any decision. When he arrived home, the tension was evident on his face. Martina immediately realized something was wrong and asked what had happened. Rubens, hesitant and clearly shaken, began to describe his day. He explained how he had asked Mr. Lorenzo for help and his initial refusal to offer any financial assistance. Then, with great effort, he mentioned the call he received on the bus. "Martina, Mr. Lorenzo called me with a proposal, a terrible proposal," said Rubens, his voice shaking as he remembered what had been suggested. He then revealed the details of the inappropriate and disrespectful offer his boss had made. Martina was completely perplexed, shocked and outraged by what she heard. His face showed a mixture of fury and disbelief. "How dare he suggest something like that?" she exclaimed, standing up in a rush. "This is unacceptable, humiliating. I can't believe he thought we would consider such a thing." Rubens agreed, feeling embarrassed for even bringing that proposal up for discussion. "I know, Martina. It's revolting." I told him immediately that was out of the question. Still shaken, Martina said firmly, "Our dignity is not for sale, Rubens. No matter how difficult our situation is, we would never accept something so immoral and disrespectful." The couple spent the next few hours discussing what to do next, and both agreed that Rubens should look for another job immediately. After all, they could not continue working for someone who demonstrated such a lack of ethics. The following day, Rubens made the difficult decision to resign. He could not imagine continuing in an environment where his and his wife's dignity had been so disrespected with the resignation letter in hand. He explained that he was leaving for ethical and personal reasons, with renewed determination. Rubens began the search for a new job opportunity. Rubens went to several interviews, but the answer was always the same: "We will get in touch if there is any news." The phone, however, remained silent. Savings were quickly depleting while bills continued to pile up. Martina did her best to remain optimistic, encouraging Rubens not to give up, but the concern was evident in her eyes after almost a month of searching without results. Discouragement began to take over Rubens, and hope seemed more distant every day. Rubens began to question whether he had made the right decision by leaving his previous job. Although he knew that ethically he could not continue in that environment, the weight of his family's critical financial situation led him to consider all alternatives desperate. He decided to try one last trick: get his old job back. He knew that his boss might not be willing to rehire him, but he decided to take a chance. He arranged a meeting with Mr. Lorenzo, hoping to find understanding and compassion. When he arrived at the office, he was greeted with a coldness that despised him. His former boss, an austere man of few words, seemed disinclined to help him with his heart racing. Rubens reported the difficult situation he was facing. He asked almost pleadingly to be rehired, promising to work harder than ever and accept any conditions. The boss listened to him in silence, impassive, and after a long pause that seemed like an eternity, he finally broke the silence. "Rubens, I understand your situation, but the conditions are different now. If you want your job back, it will take a bigger commitment. It's not just you who will have to compromise. Your wife will also have to be at my disposal." Rubens was paralyzed, unable to believe what he was hearing. The boss's words echoed like a nightmare, bringing him a mixture of shock and indignation, but also a deep despair. He struggled to remain calm in the face of this absurd situation. "This is unacceptable," said Rubens, trying to contain the anger and repulsion he felt. "My wife is not a bargaining chip. I cannot accept this proposal," replied Rubens firmly. The boss shrugged indifferently. "The choice is yours, Rubens, but remember that opportunities are rare and you are in a complicated position. feeling humiliated. He needed to find another solution to the problems they faced, but his former boss's inhumane proposal left him deeply shaken. I knew I needed to be honest with Martina about what had happened. "Honey, I need to tell you what happened today." I went to talk to my old boss and asked to be rehired. He said he might consider it, but he made a demand. He wants you to be at his disposal too. I refused. I said I would never accept this condition. You are not a bargaining chip, but I thought I needed to be honest with you about what he said. Martin was silent for a moment, absorbing what she had heard after a few moments. To Reuben's surprise, she responded with unexpected determination. "Reuben, we are living in endless torment. The debts, the pressure, the lack of money. I can't stand seeing you suffering like this anymore. If this is the only way to leave all this behind, then I accept it. If you're following our story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel." Reuben was astonished, completely surprised by his wife's response. Reuben tried to argue. "You, Martina, we can't do that. It's not fair to you, and I can't allow you to put yourself through something like that." "Reuben, we're in this together. If this is the way out of this nightmare, I am willing to make that sacrifice. I don't want you to carry all the weight alone." His words, although difficult to hear, showed the deep love and commitment he felt for his family. Reuben felt overcome with a mixture of relief and guilt. He knew that Martina was willing to do anything for them, but the decision still felt painful and almost unbearable. "We will get through this together," said Martina, trying to comfort him, "and somehow we will find a better way in the future." Reuben hugged her, feeling her strength and support. I knew that together we would face the consequences of that difficult decision. The next morning, Reuben woke up with a conflicted feeling of anguish. I knew I needed to resolve this situation once and for all. With a heavy heart, he picked up the phone and called his boss. "Hello, Reuben. Have you made your decision yet?" "Yes, sir. My wife and I talked, and she accepted the proposal. We are willing to do whatever is necessary to resolve the situation." There was a brief pause, and then the boss responded with contained satisfaction, although he maintained an impersonal tone. "Very good, Reuben. I am pleased to know that we have reached an understanding. I will arrange for you to be rehired immediately. As for your wife, I will arrange a meeting to discuss the details. Tell her I'll wait for her tomorrow night at my apartment," said the boss coldly. Reuben felt a sinking feeling in his stomach, but managed to mumble a thank you before hanging up. He was torn between relief at having a possible solution to his financial problems and deep guilt for involving Martina in something so humiliating. He turned to her, who was waiting anxiously for him, and with a heavy look confirmed, "It's done. He guaranteed my rehiring, but asked to meet you tomorrow night at his apartment." Martina nodded, trying to hide the uneasiness she felt. "Everything will be fine, Reuben. We will get through this together." When night came, Martina got ready to go out before leaving. He gave Reuben an encouraging smile, even though his eyes reflected the fear and pain he felt. "I love you, Reuben. We will get through all this." While Reuben waited at home, every minute seemed to drag on forever. He could not get rid of the image of Martina, his beloved wife, facing the presence of that detestable man. The hours passed, slowly immersed in a heavy and distressing silence. For Mr. Lorenzo, having Martina in his apartment was a source of unhealthy satisfaction. He saw her as a conquest, a beautiful woman far beyond any of his expectations. Now under his rule because of her position and influence, he had been watching her from afar for some time, admiring her grace and beauty, and that night he felt intoxicated by the sensation of having her within his reach. Martina, on the other hand, displayed a captivating beauty that contrasted sharply with the gloomy environment in which she His eyes shone with intelligence and strength, even in the midst of the most difficult circumstances, with long shiny hair, smooth skin, and an elegant bearing. She was an absolute contrast to the dark, inhuman figure of Lord Lorenzo. Physically, Mr. Lorenzo also made an unpleasant impression, a tall, thin man with a hunched posture that seemed to reflect his distorted character. His face was marked by deep wrinkles, and his small, penetrating eyes seemed always looking for something to criticize. Signor Lorenzo received her with a cynical smile. Clearly pleased to see her there, he led her to a large, well-lit living room where he offered her a glass of wine. "Martina, I'm pleased that you accepted my proposal," he said, settling into an armchair and giving her an appraising look with her heart racing but trying to remain firm. Martina responded with determination. "Let's get this over with, so my husband and I can move on." Mr. Lorenzo let out a dry laugh, devoid of humor. "I like objective women," he commented, getting up and approaching his presence seemed to grow in intensity with each step, and Martina felt a wave of revulsion. But she remained firm. Signor Lorenzo touched her face with a cold hand, the contact making her want to flinch, but she remained still in addition to being charming. "You are very brave, Martina. A shame that your courage is used like this," he said as his hand slid down her arm. That night was a test of endurance for Martina. Signor Lorenzo treated her with a mixed mixture of condescension and desire, clearly pleased to exert his power over her and reassert the control he believed he had. Martina in turn remained mentally distant, focusing on the future that she and Rubens could have after that painful sacrifice when Signor Lorenzo led her to the sofa. He began to caress her face and hair with artificial gentleness. His touch was cold and calculated, and each caress felt like an unbearable weight. But Martina held firm, remembering the ultimate goal of enduring all of this for the sake of her family. With an arrogant gaze, Signor Lorenzo watched each gesture designed to provoke discomfort. At one point, he forced her to change her clothes, making her wear something revealing that he chose himself. Increasing her embarrassment, he made her pose for him, delighting in the power he had over her, taking pleasure in the humiliation he managed to impose. As the night progressed, Signor Lorenzo became bolder, completely ignoring Martina's signs of discomfort and resistance. Every cynical smile, every insolent comment served to fuel his sense of triumph for him that night. Wasn't just about desire, it was about absolute control and the satisfaction of reducing someone worthy to an object of your whim. When he finally finished, Signor Lorenzo walked away, straightening his clothes with an air of satisfaction. He took one last look at Martina, who quickly got dressed, avoiding meeting his gaze. "You were incredible, I want to repeat it," said Mr. Lorenzo. Satisfied hours passed, each one longer and more painful than the last, until he finally seemed satisfied, pulling away and adjusting his clothes with a satisfied smile. "Very good, Martina. You can go now. Tell Rubens he can start on Monday." Martina got dressed quickly, eager to leave that place as she walked through the door. She felt an immediate relief, but also a deep sadness, something she knew she would carry for a long time. When he arrived home, he found Rubens waiting anxiously, without saying anything. She entered, and her face reflected the weight of the night she had just endured. Rubens ran to hug her, feeling the pain and suffering she had faced. "Forgive me, Martina. I'm sorry about all this," he said, his voice choked with guilt and sadness. Martina looked at him, her eyes full of tears, but with renewed determination. "We will get through this, Rubens. I did this for us, and now we need to move on the night after meeting with Signor Lorenzo." Martina prepared herself for another test. This time, she would meet her boss's friend, the man who had made the original proposal. As he got ready, he felt a mixture of nervousness and resignation. Rubens, despite being devastated, tried to offer him support, knowing that this would be another difficult test that they would have to face together. This friend, Mr. Lorenzo's, was a refined-looking man, in stark contrast to her boss, but equally manipulative. He was known for his superficial charm, always using his seductive ways to get what he wanted. And Martina knew that tonight would be another emotional battle to endure. Upon arriving at the indicated address, a sophisticated hotel in the city center, Martina was greeted by a doorman who accompanied her to a luxurious suite where Antonio was already waiting for her upon entering. She found him comfortably seated on a leather sofa, holding a GL glass of wine. He stood up when he saw her, offering a smile that seemed rehearsed. "You are even more charming than I remembered. Let's enjoy the evening, and for a moment forget about the problems you and your husband are facing." Antonio delicately took Martina's hand, sliding his fingers in a calculated way, as if trying to dissolve her barriers. The conversation was light, full of superficial compliments and promises that sounded empty. At one point, he asked her to stand up, making her spin around to admire his body. His gaze filled with desire, he pulled her close, enveloping her in a hug that made her feel trapped. Antonio whispered words in her ear, phrases that made Martina want to run away, but she remained firm, remembering the sacrifice she made for her family. At first, Martina felt deeply uncomfortable, but as time passed, Antonio's kindness and attention began to disarm her. He made her feel wanted and valued in an unexpected way. His gestures were careful. His compliments seemed genuine, and he showed an unexpected interest in her as a person, not just as an object of desire. As the night progressed, Martina noticed a change within her. Antonio's caring approach, his ability to lead the conversation, and the atmosphere he had created awakened emotions in her that she did not expect to feel. Martina couldn't help but feel a genuine attraction for Antonio. He guided her to a comfortable bed and gently caressed her face. His eyes were intense, but not threatening, and the way he spoke made her feel valued. "You are incredibly beautiful, Martina. I want you to feel comfortable with me tonight," he said as his fingers gently slid down her arm. A shiver ran through Martina's body, torn between loyalty to her husband and the unexpected attraction. She felt she found herself surprised by the intensity of the moment. Antonio kissed her softly, and without realizing it, Martina responded, being enveloped by the desire that was growing inside her. That night became a whirlwind of confusing emotions for her. On the one hand, she remembered the practical reason that led her there, but on the other, she couldn't ignore the unexpected connection she felt. Antonio seemed to notice this dedication and treated her with a kindness that surprised Ed. Unlike her previous experience with her boss, Antonio was careful and respectful, handling her in a way that seemed to value every moment. When the night came to an end, he hugged her, and in a soft voice, whispered words of gratitude and admiration, leaving Martina immersed in confused feelings, but with an unexpected relief at finally having finished that part of her sacrifice, although she felt the moral complexity of the entire situation. Martina could not avoid a feeling of gratitude for having lived an experience that in a way made her feel alive and wanted again. When she returned home, she was confused and full of conflicting emotions. He knew that what he felt for Antonio was wrong, but he couldn't help it. When she met Rubens again, he wrapped her in a comforting hug, and Martina realized that despite everything, her love for her husband was what really mattered after that night. Martina's life took an unexpected turn. The meeting with Antonio, initially motivated by necessity, had awakened deep and uncontrollable feelings in her. Without Rubens knowing, Martina began to meet Antonio in secret, and these meetings became more frequent. Each moment together was more intense than the last, and Antonio knew exactly how to make her feel special, something she hadn't experienced in a long time with each encounter. Desire and pleasure grew, and Martina began to look forward to these moments of intimacy. Antonio was also completely captivated by Martina. He treated her with a mixture of admiration and desire, always seeking to please her and make her feel unique. Luxurious gifts, such as fine-clothes jewelry and other treats, became part of Martina's life, ensuring that she and Ruben would never face financial difficulties again. Furthermore, Antonio used his influence to help Ruben advance professionally, offering the family a new security that Martina saw as an opportunity for a fresh start with the promotions and generous salary increases that Antonio had guaranteed for Ruben's Martina, and he began to meet regularly in discreet hotels and remote locations, always careful to keep their relationship secret with each new encounter. Martina felt more alive and empowered, something she felt was missing in her life before the passion and danger of forbidden encounters became almost an addiction, and she increasingly indulged in this clandestine connection. Ruben, on the other hand, began to notice the change in Martina. Although I didn't know about the meetings, I noticed that she was different, happier, more confident, and at the same time a little more distant. He attributed this transformation to improving financial conditions and alleviating worries that previously weighed on them with the bonuses and generous salary he now received. Ruben saw his financial problems disappear completely. They were able to pay off their debts, purchase a new home, and lead a comfortable life. Despite the material comfort and the intense pleasure she felt in her meetings with Antonio, Martina never failed to perceive the reality of her double life guilt, and the moral complexity of the situation constantly weighed on Martina. But the intensity of passion and attraction led her to continue her secret meetings. She enjoyed every moment of excitement and freedom that these moments brought her, while maintaining the facade of a stable and happy family life, with Ruben determined to balance these two worlds. Martina tried not to allow one to interfere with the other. We hope you enjoyed our story. Now we want to hear from you. What do you think of Martina's attitude in continuing to meet Mr. Antonio? And as for Ruben, do you think he was wrong to allow her to go to these meetings? Initially, did you like this story? I loved that it stayed here until the end. Subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming. Click on the videos on the screen